Hamilton. I promise no rapping today. Everyone tolerated the rap. David, here's looking at you last week. And today we're going to be looking at a song that very much has to do with the relationship between Alexander Hamilton and his wife Eliza. So last week we saw how they met and how the sister Angelica facilitated this, much like Leah and Rachel, the sisters who both were after the same man. But Eliza and Alexander are married. They have a beautiful relationship at first. We'll get to that later on. And there's a scene where Hamilton has gotten very upset, in the war efforts. And there's a scene where he sort of blows up to George Washington, and Washington says, "Go home. Your wife needs you at home." And that's the song we're going to be looking at. Go home. He shows up at home and he sees Eliza is pregnant. And she sings a beautiful song that's called "That Would Be Enough." And it's the song of the spouse who is supporting someone doing great things in the world. And she knows that she's in a supporting role. And she says, just as long as you come home at the end of the day, that would be enough. And so we're going to look at this song and then compare it to the exchanges about Tzipporah, the wife of Moses, who also, of course, is supporting a man in his greatness. And it's not easy to be in that position, neither for Eliza in the musical nor for Tzipporah in the Torah text. So we'll start now by watching. I did find a good video of it, of this song called "That Would Be Enough." So we'll see, again, we'll see at the very beginning of this clip, Hamilton sort of storming off, Washington storming off, walking away and sending Hamilton home. And then Eliza will be singing this beautiful song with a little bit of Hamilton singing it as well. Here we go. That will be enough. That would be enough. Pardon me. That would be enough. That is different.
Look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now. Look around.
How long have you known?
A month or so.
Eliza, you should have told me.
I wrote to the general a month ago. I begged him to send you home.
You should have told me.
I'm not sorry. I knew you'd fight until the war was won, but you deserve a chance to meet your son. Look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now.
Will you relish being a poor man's wife, unable to provide for your life?
I relish being your wife. Look around. Look at where you are. Look at where you started. The fact that you're alive is a miracle. Just stay alive, that would be enough. And if this child shares a fraction of your smile, or a fragment of your mind, look out, world, that would be enough. I don't pretend to know the challenges you are facing, the worlds you keep erasing and creating in your mind. But I'm not afraid. I know who I married. So long as you come home at the end of the day, that would be enough. We don't need a legacy. We don't need money. If I could grant you peace of mind, if you could let me inside your heart, oh, let me be a part of the narrative in the story they will write someday. Let this moment be the first chapter where you decide to stay. And I could be enough.
What a beautiful, intimate moment between those two on the stage. And it stands in contrast to so many of the other scenes, which are jam-packed with action and fighting. It's a domestic moment. So let's just take a moment to look at the lyrics before we jump into our text.
Can I just add one thing?
Oh, please, Anita in
Okay.
Chicago.
So musically, she's referencing several things here. Remember at the beginning when they first met, actually at the very beginning of the show when Angelica and Eliza and Peggy are talking about how lucky they are to be alive right now.
Look around, look around.
Right. So that's a
Mhm.
reference to them being alive at the time of the revolution and how exciting this all is. So he brings that in
Right.
musically.
Mhm.
He also
Mhm.
brings in musically at the end of the song, Let Me Be a Part of Your Narrative, which was a second, it wasn't part of when he first wrote the song. He added that at the end when he realized at the end when she's talking about being a part
Yes.
of the narrative.
Okay. Yep. This is going to be a foreshadowing
He added
of
that
the significance
verse
of this narrative.
so
Mhm.
that she wanted to be a part of his narrative at the end when she decides during Burn, the other number she sings with him about him, that she's taking herself out of the narrative. So she had to be part of the narrative first. And there's one other line in there that I would be enough, when she says that I would be enough, because ultimately in the second act, she finds out she's not. So,
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. There's a progression in that phrase. I could be enough. We could be enough. That would be enough. I'm looking at the bottom right-hand side of this
Right.
page. So, yeah, so this song really is all about their relationship. I wanted to point out a few other things, and thank you for that note about, look around at how lucky we are to be alive right now. Like, just, it's enough, Dayenu, right? It's enough. It's enough just to be here. And by the way, to be alive right now is also right now in this moment in our family life. We're about to have a child. Everything's about to change. Isn't that enough? And aren't I enough? And there are a bunch of things happening for them. She's worried that she's not enough. She's also worried that he's getting so carried away with his worlds that he keeps creating in his mind. Right here, I don't pretend to know the challenges you're facing, the worlds you keep erasing and creating in your mind. What's he erasing? He's erasing monarchy or tyranny. He's creating democracy. He's creating a new system of government. And she's showing that even though he doesn't really take her seriously on a level, right? She's not really part of that broader narrative. She also is showing him, I'm not afraid. I know who I married. She's showing an incredible strength. And in many ways, she is his anchor in this song. We realized when Hamilton comes home to Eliza, when Alexander comes home to Eliza, that he's able to show his weakness, his uncertainties, and she's the anchor for all of those. He realizes when he's going to have a kid, he realizes how poor he is. This is going to the bottom left here. Will you relish being a poor man's wife, unable to provide for your life? And she's the one who reassures him, I'm going to the top here now, and says, I relish being your wife. And just the fact that you're alive is a miracle. Just stay alive, that would be enough. Of course, he will not stay alive. So and just stay alive, by the way, is going to come back again later when it's their son whose life is at risk, and we're not going to, we'll get to that later. So yes, let me be a part of this, but also I think she's conflicted about what this whole big thing is. She's clearly sidelined, and that's a piece that I want to focus on as we move toward the Tzipporah story. So I'll share now our texts. There are quite a few texts. I don't know if we'll get to all of them in detail, but the parallels are just perfect here in our Hamil Torah, as I called it before, our Hamil Torah series. So the first text, again, remember, Tzipporah is the wife of Moses. She is the daughter of Yitro, of Jethro, who is Kohen Midian. So he is not an Israelite. This was they met when Moses ran away after killing the Egyptian, and they marry, and they have 2 children there in Midian. And after that, the whole burning bush, go save my people episode happens, and Moses sort of gets to work. So it's like marrying someone who then later becomes the president, and you find yourself being the first lady. So Tzipporah didn't really sign up for this. And it seems from this text that Tzipporah was not part of the Exodus at all, for good reason. So this fast forward after they leave Egypt, and they reach the Sinai desert. They haven't yet received the 10 commandments, but we see Yitro comes along with Tzipporah and the 2 children. So we start here with Vayishma Yitro Kohen Midian Choten Moshe. Jethro, the priest of Midian, the father-in-law of Moses, heard it's Kol Asher Asa Elokim LeMoshe Uli Yisrael Amo, everything that God had done for Moses and for his nation, the Israelites, that God had taken them out of Egypt, etc., etc. And so verse 2, Vayikach Yitro Choten Moshe et Tzipporah Eshet Moshe. Yitro takes Tzipporah and brings her, takes Tzipporah to greet Moses along with the kids. In other words, Tzipporah didn't leave Egypt. Tzipporah didn't have to leave Egypt. She wasn't enslaved. And what I'll show you in a moment is that it didn't make sense when Moses was, heading into Egypt for a dangerous mission. It wouldn't make sense to bring wife and children along with and endanger them. But look at this phrase, brought back Tzipporah, Eshet Moshe, the wife of Moses, achar shilucheha, after she had been sent away. He sent her away. And verse 3, ve'et shnei baneha, her 2 sons. It doesn't say his 2 sons, but okay, it's her and her sons. Asher shem echad Gershom. We get a reminder of their names, Gershom and Eliezer. We get a reminder of the reasons behind their names. I want to skip through this again, just to be able to move through a couple of different texts. But verse 5, Yitro brings then, Moses' sons and wife, Banav ve'ishto el Moshe, to Moses, El Hamidbar, to the nation, to the wilderness where the nation is encamped, where is the mountain of God. So they're getting ready to receive the Torah. And verse 6, Vayomer el Moshe, he says to Moses, Ani chotencha Yitro ba elecha. Look, I'm here. Your father-in-law Jethro, I'm coming to you. Ve'ishtecha u'shnei vaneha imah, and your wife and her sons are with her. We're all here to greet you. Verse 7, and Moses went out to meet his father-in-law. Full stop. And has a powwow with his father-in-law, mano y mano, right? Greets him, kisses him, vayishtachu, vayishaklo, vayishalu ish l're'ehu shalom. They have a big greeting. They ask one another, ish l're'ehu, one to one, how they're doing, and they go off into the tent to have a meeting. And in that tent, Moses tells Yitro, "Vayisaper Moshe lechotno et kol asher asa Hashem leparo lemitzrayim," about all the amazing, miraculous things they've seen against Pharaoh and Egypt and so on and so forth. And Yitro says, blessed is God. There's no mention here of Tzipporah, of how he greeted Tzipporah, of how he greeted his sons. He is a man on a mission. And I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say that Tzipporah is not getting a lot of his attention right now, even though it doesn't explicitly say that in the verse. I'm taking a step back just to show you the Rashi commentary on that phrase, after his having sent her away, right? Tzipporah is returning after her having been sent away. This is Rashi quoting the Midrash that shows that he didn't bring Tzipporah back to Egypt with him, which, as I said before, made good sense. When God said to him, go return to Egypt, Moses took his wife and his sons and went to meet Aaron. And Aaron says, who are these? And they haven't seen each other obviously in many years. Moses introduces his brother Aaron to his wife. This is my wife who I married in Midian. These are my children. And he says, where are you taking them? Here in the Hebrew, it's over here. Vehechan ata molichan. Like, where are you bringing them? Amar lo lemitzrayim. He said, I'm taking them to Egypt. And Aaron, the big brother, says, are you crazy? Amarlo, he says to him, Al harishonim anu mitzta'arim. We're still concerned, aggrieved about the first ones, the ones that are already there. Ve'ata ba lehosif alehem. And you're bringing us more to be in trouble or enslaved. So Moses says, Amar la, says to his wife, Lichi levet avich. You know what? Go back to your father's house. And she takes the two sons and goes. Someone I think accidentally wrote. I'm just going to clear that. So Tzipporah missed the whole thing. Tzipporah wasn't there for the 10 plagues. Tzipporah wasn't there for the splitting of the sea. When they finally get to Mount Sinai, Tzipporah and the children come back. She hasn't been part of the narrative, to use that phrase from Hamilton. And we won't read this in depth, but Seforno, another commentary, says that actually it must have been that when they got to Mount Horeb, which is Mount Sinai, and they clearly encamped for a little bit more of a length of time, then she sent word, or that's when Yitro, took the time and waited, and then brought the wife and children because things were more stable. So that's episode number 1, and now I want to show you episode number 2. So episode number 1 is a little bit of the background, that what Moses experienced without his wife, and those are formative times in his leadership. And very much like Hamilton needs to be away from home, he needs to be in battle, and he needs to be writing and doing and building a nation. Eliza says, let me be a part of the narrative, and let me into your ideas. And she's also worried about him. She's worried, just stay alive. And we wonder, like, what was Tzipporah thinking during those many months? It was not overnight, right? That Moses goes back and forth to Pharaoh, and she's waiting and she's wondering, and she maybe doesn't hear. So she's the wife, sort of the spouse, waiting and trailing after her husband's mission. Now we go ahead to the book of Numbers, the book of Bimidbar. So they're now well past Sinai. They've been in the wilderness probably a couple of years at this point. It's not clear the exact time frame of this episode. This is the episode where Miriam speaks lashon hara, gossip, or evil speech. And the text doesn't give us a lot of detail, and I'm going to show you sort of the world of the Midrash that opens up this story. Miriam and her brother Aaron, vatidaber Miriam ve'Aharon, speak out against, or speak to each other against Moses, Moshe. I'll just note that the verb here, spoke, is not in the plural like Miriam and Aaron spoke. It's in the singular, vatidaber Miriam ve'Aharon. So it's Miriam herself speaking to Aaron. Aaron is the listener, Miriam is the speaker, and that's why, according to the sages, that's why Miriam ended up getting punished for speaking lashon hara. Right? This is where she gets leprosy. She gets tzarat, and Aaron was only an accessory. He was hearing it, but he wasn't active. So Miriam comes and tells something to Aaron. It doesn't say what, but it says what it was about. Al odot ha'isha hakushit asher lakach. About that Cushite woman he married. Ki isha kushit lakach. For he had married a Cushite woman. The translation puts that last phrase in quotes. It's not necessarily true that that's the phrase. Again, in the Hebrew, it sounds like saying, she spoke to him about the Cushite woman, for he had taken a Cushite woman as a wife. Most of the commentaries believe that this is not referring to another wife, that this is referring to Tzipporah, and they go upside down and backwards to explain why Tzipporah is being referred to as a Cushite woman. A Cushite would be a dark-skinned woman or African, a black woman. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. One says that Cushite was very different in their appearance. So too, Tzipporah was very different. She was from Midian. That's one way of explaining why she's being referred to as Isha Kushit, even though she's not a Cushite. Another explanation is she was being described as the opposite of what she was. So the Cushite are dark, and that's not considered beautiful, but Tzipporah was very beautiful. And sometimes the Torah does use euphemistic language to say the opposite of what it means. So for example, a prostitute biblically can be referred to as Kadesha, which means someone very holy. So it's actually someone unholy, but using opposite language. So I'm just giving you some examples from the world of the commentaries that explain how on earth otherwise could this Cushite actually be referring to Moses' wife. They seem to all, or at least the consensus, largely the consensus, is that this is referring to Tzipporah, and Miriam is saying something about Tzipporah, and they're upset about this something, and they say, has God only spoken through Moses? God spoke through us too. We are prophets also. And that's the end of the quote. And then it says, by the way, Moses was very humble, like he was totally innocent. What was it that they were talking about? Here's the big reveal. This is why I love teaching on Zoom. When you give out a source sheet in person, everybody's reading 2 sources ahead. Here you can't do that. So Rashi explains. Rashi is quoting the Midrash. That first it explains why it says that she spoke, not they spoke, because she was the one who opened the conversation. And the assumption here is that Isha Kushit Lakach means he had taken a wife and now he got rid of that wife. That he had divorced his wife or separated on some level from his wife. So how did Miriam know that Moses had separated himself from his wife? Uminayin haita yoda'at Miriam sheperesh Moshe min ha'isha. Rabbi Natan says, Miriam was standing next to Tzipporah when she heard Tzipporah made a comment. Miriam haita betzad Tzipporah. B'sha'a shene'emar leMoshe. At another episode when they told Moshe, these two, Eldad and Medad, are prophesying. Eldad u'Medad mitnab'im b'machaneh. They're prophesying in the camp. It was another conversation, but Tzipporah overheard this. Kevan shesham'at Tzipporah. Amra, and she said, Oy l'neshotehem, nebach for their wives. Shel elu, of those 2 men, Eldad and Medad. Imhem nizkakim l'nevuah. If they suddenly have something to do with prophecy, they're going to separate from their wives, just like Moses separated from me. Excuse me. Sheyihiyu porshin minishotehem kederach sheperesh ba'alim mimeni. And that, overhearing that, is how Miriam learned that Moses had separated from his wife. Umisham yad'a Miriam v'higida le'Aharon, and reported this to Aaron. She was worried about her brother and sister-in-law. And then it goes on to a little lesson about Lashon Hara, how much more so for someone who intentionally speaks badly of their fellow. She was speaking out of concern for Moses and for Tzipporah. She was saying, did you hear this? Moses separated from Tzipporah? Which, by the way, makes sense then in the context of the next remark, where they say to each other, but God is prophesying, we're prophesying too. God is speaking to us too, and we stayed with our spouses. Why is Moses different? Why is Moses special? And in the Torah text, God comes and berates them and says, you don't even understand. Moses' prophecy is much more sophisticated than yours. It's on a higher level. Peh el peh, I speak to Moses face to face, mouth to mouth, so to speak, um, in real time, not in a vision or a dream. That's the way I speak to all of you. But Moses is a different level of prophet. So don't judge Moses because you don't understand. His prophecy is different. Regardless, what I'm interested in here with relation to the relationship is is that Tzipporah has been left, very practically been left by her husband so that he can go off and do his work, his godly work, his holy work. And the Midrash actually says it even more explicitly. Now, this is the Midrash that Rashi, you see here at the bottom, Sifrei Bamidbar, Rashi almost never makes up his own ideas. He's praised as such a, a central commentary. He's really bringing the Midrash in when there's a gap in the text. And he's quoting this Midrash. How did Miriam know that Moses had ceased from marital relations? So specifically, Mipiria Verivia, from being intimate with his wife. So it doesn't say he separated from. It says really they didn't have a physical relationship, and it explains differently here. Miriam noticed Tzipporah wasn't getting dressed up, wasn't making herself attractive, maybe had let herself go is maybe the way we would say it, but wasn't worrying about her appearance or attractiveness the way other women, married women, did. And she asked her, and Tzipporah said, Ein achicha makpid badavar. Your brother doesn't seem to care about the way that I look. And the implication here is that he's not physically intimate with her. And so she goes and runs to Aaron and shares this. This last piece, Rashi explains in the context of this story why they, as I said before, why they were saying God also spoke with us and we have not separated from our spouses. The Sifrei goes on and on in this manner, the Midrash. So again, in light of that scene now that we saw where, Alexander is missing some really important family moments. His wife is expecting. She wrote to the general to let Hamilton come home a month ago, it says. So it's taken a month till he even got to come home. He only let him go, by the way, because there was a conflict. So, she's alone, pregnant for the first time, expecting their first child. And she says, just come home at the end of the day. So long as you come home at the end of the day, that would be enough. Don't go off doing all this fancy work. Don't leave me behind. And I think in the Hamilton narrative, Eliza wants both at the same time. She wants to be part of it, but she also doesn't want Alexander to run off and do the work and leave her. So I think she's conflicted. Here, of course, we don't really get Tzipporah's voice, but we do get an assumption that what Moses has done seems to be unique because of his position, and perhaps even seems to be warranted. I think this in many ways comes down to is what we might call these days work-life balance, right? A public role and a domestic anchor. And it's really hard on the people who are holding down the fort. And it's very hard to strike that balance. And we know that then Hamilton stays home for a little while and is missing all the action until he gets called back. That's the next song, right? Got to get your right hand man back. That's what happens next, right? They say to Hamilton, to Washington, got to get Hamilton back. And that's when he finally goes into battle. It's very exciting. But if he's home, he's missing that. And if he's out on the battlefield, he's missing a lot at home. And it's I think a very human element of the Moses story. And in many ways, I have to say that he sacrifices his home life for the nation. And I think we've talked about this in some of my other classes. In the class on the Book of Numbers, we talked about Moses being a unique leader who was a man of God and who really didn't get the people with their daily needs and their daily complaints and kvetching. He can't relate that. We're going to listen to one more song today shortly. And the line in that song is, it wasn't Hamilton, but it was Burr saying, domestic life was never quite my style, or was never quite my thing. I can't remember the exact line. So anyway, this is the point where I'll turn to you. And oh, thank you, Max, for that comment in the chat. Echoes of the current royal family. Yeah, it's hard to be a public figure and also take care of your own. And I see another question in the chat. I see, Michael, your hand. Why don't we go to your hand, Michael, and then I'll speak to there's a private chat that I'll speak to in a moment. Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you, Rabba. I just had a text question from early on. We looked at the Hebrew and it had the va and not la. It had a conjunction versus the verb to be with respect to Miriam and Aaron. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
So do you mean the first phrase vatidaber Miriam?
Yeah, the vatidaber. I'm curious why it's written that way if that wasn't the intent.
So I'll just share it for a moment to make sure we're clear on what the question is and make sure everyone is following it. Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't this far up. I know, give it a moment, it might be blurry, but it will clarify. Vatidaber Miriam, Michael, that's the one you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
So grammatically what's happening here is what's called in Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, the vav hahipuch. When you have the vav, which means and.
Right, of course, yeah.
And then you have tidaber, which would sound like a future tense. It makes it into a past. It makes it into a past tense. So it means, and she spoke.
Then why is...
So what are you asking?
I guess it's translated differently than the Hebrew.
Yes.
That's really my core question.
Yes, thank you. So it's translated Miriam and Aaron spoke. The Hebrew is vatidaber Miriam ve'Aharon.
Yeah, I understand the Hebrew.
So in English, we're stuck with the word spoke. You could say she spoke. You could say they spoke. It's the same verb. She spoke, they spoke, he spoke, we spoke. So there's no way for the English to show this grammatic strangeness that happens where it's actually not they spoke, it's she spoke.
But this gives and then I'll be done with it, and thank you, Rabba. But the English translation gives a very different impression of the event than what actually occurred.
Yeah, I wonder, would it have been more accurate to say Miriam? You see, you can't say Miriam spoke and Aaron. You could say Miriam spoke with Aaron. Actually, they could have translated it that way. This is where every translation is an interpretation, right? Every translation colors our experience of the text. So it's an imperfect translation. However, Michael, what you're highlighting, the awkwardness of the Hebrew here, which is almost impossible to make sense of in the English, because it doesn't even make sense. It does not make sense in the Hebrew. So the translators would rather not create a sentence that doesn't make sense. Thank you.
Okay,
thank you. But that is the inherent tension in this translation. I see Miriam, but before Miriam, I wanted to read out this question that I saw pop through first, and then Miriam. The question here was, how do the rabbis justify Moshe's separation from Tzipporah? It's a great question. They assume because of God's response, which is, I didn't this part of the text, but God's response is, you don't understand. Moses is unique. I'll read it out loud because I had it here before. Well, I could bring it up actually. I could bring it up and show it to you if there seems to be interest in it. Here we go. I'm going to show you. So this blue highlighted part is what we just saw in our text. And suddenly God called to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam and said, "Come, talk with me." And God comes and then asks Aaron and Miriam to step forward and explains, "When a prophet of the Lord arises among you, I make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream." Bachalom in Hebrew. Lochen avdi Moshe b'chol beiti ne'eman. That's not so with my servant Moses, who is Ne'eman, my personal trusted servant in my bait. He's my ben bait. He's my personal buddy. I don't know. He's a very different level of prophet. With him, I speak mouth to mouth plainly and not in riddles. And he beholds the likeness of the Lord. So what the commentaries take from this is that Moses separating from his wife was a necessary part of his spiritual role. And it means that unfortunately she's collateral damage. And if you speak to any spouse of a CEO or even a busy pulpit rabbi, or any first ladies or second gentlemen out there, I'm sure they would relate to the sacrifices that a spouse makes. Miriam, I'm curious about what you wanted to say.
On the Hebrew grammar, in my mind, I translated it as though they spoke in one voice. And that's why.
Vatidaber Miriam ve'Aharon.
Female, because in the next sentence, I think they use the word they, which makes it sound as though the two of them were in agreement. And if you have a male and a female, then you're going to use the male form of the word.
Thank you.
If it had only been Miriam, they would have used a feminine word.
So I think the commentaries also have to reconcile themselves to the fact that after this, only Miriam is punished.
Which I could never reconcile.
Okay, there you go.
It was a male dominated.
And women gossiping we would have a low tolerance for women like that also maybe. And I'll just clarify because there's a follow-up question. So yes, the implication was that Moses needed a higher level of holiness or separation from sexual activity in order to be in an extra holy elevated state, which we know is part of the purification for Sinai, for example, for women and for men in that context. So Tzipporah doesn't have to worry because she's not talking to God. Miriam and Aaron don't have to worry because they're talking only through visions. It's only Moses who seems to encounter God directly. And because of that, well, Tzipporah loses out. And it does sound like she pressed. Thank you for that comment. She let herself go. She's not happy about it. Pepita, what did you want to say?
I'm unmuted. I just wanted to answer Michael's comment because I looked it up in my translation by Robert Alter.
That's a good one.
And it's very interesting. He says for that same line, and Miriam and Aaron with her spoke against Moses concerning etc. But then there's a comment. There's a very interesting comment. Says this is one of the most striking instances of an expressive grammatical device in ancient Hebrew prose. When there are two or more subjects of a verb, but a singular verb is used, here the feminine singular, there is a thematic focus on the first of the subjects as the principal agent in the action stipulated through the verb, which would explain why she gets punished.
Which means she's the agent. She's the one really instigating. Thank you.
Yeah,
and I have to say, I mean, I guess my translation was not quite alter, right? And Miriam spoke with Aaron, but I like that. And Miriam spoke and Aaron with her.
Yeah.
But daber Miriam ve'Aharon. Thank you, Pepita.
You're welcome.
Pepita, also thank you, because I know that from other classes that I've been attending, that the Sefaria translation is not always the very best. And if you have an altar site, that's very special.
Yeah,
yes.
Altar is really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think, and Altar's coming from an academic background. Tzipporah, just to maybe be a little bit defensive for Tzipporah, their goal is readability. They're going for a mass audience. So they just have a different mission. And yes, I see a direct chat about the question of maybe this is connected to the church rules for celibacy, this understanding that, to be a holy man of God, one needs to be separated from sexual activity. Judaism does not say that. Moses is a unique figure. Never again. Lo kam beYisrael od kemoshe. That's how the Torah ends. There was never and will be never another Moses. So let nobody say that to be holy, one needs to refrain from sexual activity. This is another class that I've given many times, but about the mitzvah and holiness and positivity of sexuality. However, Moses seems to be different. And we feel for Tzipporah because, like I said, she didn't sign up for this. She went for that vagabond runaway who showed up at the well. Max in Chicago, what did you want to add?
Just two observations. I actually found it very interesting that Rabba blames Tzipporah's getting sent back on Aaron. That Moses is like bringing the whole family, and that Aaron is the one who says, send her crazy. So I just found that interesting.
Say more about that. Does that defend Moses in that moment?
It kind of puts Moses in a better light. Like he was willing to take his family, or maybe he just didn't know the risks. And Aaron schooled him. We don't know, but it just kind of gives Moses a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt that it wasn't that he originally said, I'm going on this adventure, you stay home, but it was like, on better advice, you should stay home. So that was interesting. But also wearing the hat of early childhood educator and thinking about the movie, The Prince of Egypt, which is the story of Moses and the Exodus, which takes a lot from the text and the commentary. They actually do a pretty good job. And obviously it's Hollywood midrash, so there's a lot, but they put Tzipporah in the narrative and she is there at the Exodus.
Right.
In a while, but there, when they cross the sea, she's part of the celebration. So they were obviously very uncomfortable with taking her out of the narrative and letting her be written out. So they put her in.
Yes, I think that's a really interesting point. And to the modern young family, right? We want to show a husband and wife team side by side. I think Aaron and Aaron's wife are also, I haven't seen the movie in many years, but they seem to be like two couples, right? Like super couples.
Aaron is there and Miriam is there and Moses and Tzipporah are there. Like they're all.
Oh, that's what it is. It's Aaron and Miriam. Yeah, I remember that. And yeah, it's a discomfort that we feel, having left Tzipporah behind. I'm so sorry. I was going to say something about, I lost it. I lost another response that was in my head. Thank you. So I want to take one last comment and then I want to play a song. I see Paula's hand. Go ahead, Paula.
Oh, I have a question, please. Before the destruction of the Second Temple, I read a long time ago that the children, it was patriarchal, not matriarchal, the son of men. So Moses, is that correct? And
yes.
Children would be considered Jewish.
Thank you. I actually meant to bring that up, and now I'm remembering the other thing that I wanted to say. Yes, matrilineal descent doesn't really start to take hold until the time of Ezra, which is after the destruction of the first temple, between the first and second temples, exactly as you're saying, because there was so much marrying of foreign women that there was a fear that identity would be mixed up. I mean, we always know who the mother is, right? So matrilineal descent makes perfect sense if you're concerned about continuity. And this predates that by quite a long time. But Tzipporah, this is what I wanted to say. Tzipporah plays a really central role in the Jewish identity, if we can even use the word Jewish, and the Israelite identity of her children, just before the scene where Moses says, okay, go back home, I'm going to go to Pharaoh without you, it's Tzipporah does the circumcision for their second son. And there's a whole midrashic world around that too. I mean, I didn't bring those texts because it was too far off, but she's really, she saves Moses' life from this midrashic sort of serpent that comes, and she quickly circumcises the baby, realizes that Moses is in spiritual danger because he hasn't circumcised his son. So she's the one who protects Moses and who ensures the identity of their children. Tzipporah, this foreign woman, or this Isha Kushit. So, and then they turn around to her and say, okay, you go home now. Again, Aaron is there. He's been there for years, and Moses hasn't seen how bad it's gotten. So why would we bring, the wife and children into a dangerous situation if they're not needed? So I think, as you said, Max, I think I don't begrudge Moses for that moment. I do begrudge him for the lack of greeting, or at least the text doesn't show us the greeting. He's, oh, Jethro, come into my old boys club over here and let's talk. I know that's a postmodern projection. I wanted to play a closing song, which is the song where, fast forward, the baby is born, and Alexander is a father. And at the same time, as we see throughout the musical, Hamilton is sort of a parallel along with Aaron Burr, his friend / rival. And this song is beautiful because both men, it's almost like they suspend their ambition just for a moment to say, wow, I'm a dad now. And it's a sensitivity, it's a beautiful moment of showing male sensitivity. And I don't know historically whether there's any grounding in this. I highly doubt it, but there is a really beautiful moment of domestic life, as I said, and I think it's part of the struggle. So the song is called Dear Theodosia. Theodosia is the name of Aaron Burr's daughter, named for her mother, and Philip is the name of Hamilton's son. So we'll see them singing side by side to their children.
Dear Theodosia, what to say to you? You have my eyes, you have your mother's name. When you came into the world, you cried, and it broke my heart. I'm dedicating every day to you. Domestic life was never quite my style. When you smile, you knock me out, I fall apart, and I thought I was so smart. You will come of age with our young nation. We'll bleed and fight for you. We'll make it right for you. If we lay a strong enough foundation, we'll pass it on to you. We'll give the world to you, and you'll blow us all away. Someday, someday. Yeah, you'll blow us all away. Someday, someday.
Oh, Philip, when you smile, I am undone. My son, look at my son. Pride is not the word I'm looking for. There is so much more inside me now. Oh, Philip, you outshine the morning sun. My son, when you smile, I fall apart, and I thought I was so smart. My father wasn't around.
Father wasn't around.
Swear that I'll be around for you. I'll do whatever it takes.
I'll make a million mistakes.
I'll make the world safe and sound for you. our young nation. We'll bleed and fight for you, we'll make it right for you. If we lay a strong enough foundation, we'll pass it on to you. We'll give the world to you and you'll blow us all away. Someday, someday, yeah, you'll blow us all away. Someday,
It's beautiful. I just have to say, I love where they rhyme sun with sun, and where they say, and I thought I was so smart. Like these guys, these big shots just turn to mush when they see their babies. And there's one last thing I wanted to say about that song. I mean, there's so much, right? This domestic life is finally giving a new meaning and purpose to the work that they're doing out there. The way he says, pride is not the word I'm looking for. I'm thinking, no, nachas. That's the word you're looking for. There's no translation. Pride is just not enough. That's what they're feeling, these young men. Anyway, so I'll leave you with that, with these men who have a domestic life and are sort of waking up to it in a different way. Thank you so much for joining. Happy birthday again, Sivia and Meave Esrim. Really a beautiful, beautiful celebration, and we wish you well. And thanks everyone for being here.